Welcome everybody to our Demand Gen Jam session. Let me just kind of get out of this stuff here. Excited for everybody to join us today. Truett, welcome. Raj, good to have you. Rachel, Martha, looks like we're starting to get people jumping on. We've got a really great episode in store for you today. I think every one of us that's probably joining today has a CRM or has a marketing automation platform, certainly has a list of leads somewhere. And, one of the things we've been thinking about as we are getting ready for today's session is how everybody seems to be so obsessed with generating more leads. Like we need more leads. And one thing Ryan and I have been talking about all year is, yeah, that's great. We all need more leads, but are we doing everything that we possibly can to work the leads that are in our database? And that's one of the reasons why, for example, we had Sherry Otto on last month to talk about specifically around email marketing and how can we align our email campaigns more to the buyer journey. And so I'm super excited for what we're going to talk about today because what we're going to cover today is all about making sure that our CRM house and our marketing automation house is in order, because if we don't have the right things in place and we don't build a solid foundation, then we can have all kinds of problems. I know that we've experienced that personally at Vindy Digital, and I'm sure you guys have as well. So I'm super excited for everybody to be here. I see a bunch of new folks jumping on. So Steve, Truett, Victoria, Janice, good to have you on the call. We do have an agenda for those of you that are new to our jam session. Welcome. Glad to have you here. We do have an agenda that will follow along. Andrea, if you don't mind just dropping that agenda in the comments, you can follow along with us. And we're basically going to do this in two formats. So the first part of our session today, we're just going to be talking through some things with our guest, and then we'll move into a presentation. I'll share my screen, but probably the easiest thing for you to do is just follow along with our agenda as we go through this topic. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pull it up as well so I can follow along too. And we have a few housekeeping items we want to share with you before we get started. I already said this, but big shout out to those of you on LinkedIn. We've been doing the Demand Gen Jam session. This is season 3. So we've been doing it for a while, almost 3 years. But we've never gone live on LinkedIn. So it looks like all systems are go. And so hopefully those of you that are watching us live can see us and hear us. And we're glad to have you. For all of you, whether you're on LinkedIn Live or joining us on the Zoom call, we do have a Demand Gen Jammers community. It's on LinkedIn. It's the way that we stay connected in between these jam sessions. And so we do these every single month. We try to bring really smart people to talk about important things in the world of B2B marketing. But the community is the way that we stay connected in between these sessions. So if you haven't joined the Demand Gen Jammers community, there's a link in the agenda. Just click that link. You'll have to get approved, but we'll approve you right away, and stay connected with us that way. I want to quickly introduce our co-host, Ryan Miller, who's the guy I've been having this conversation with all year about. It's not just about lead gen, it's about working the leads that we already have. Right, Ryan?
Amen. Thank you guys for coming today, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Good to have you, Ryan. And excited for introducing our guest here in a second, because Ryan, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't know this person existed. So appreciate the intro. And our moderator today is Andrea. And so she'll be manning chat and helping us manage conversations via chat and teeing up questions for us as we go throughout the session today. You want to say, hey, hi, Andrea?
Hey all, thanks for being here. Just drop questions in the chat as they come along.
All right. And then moving on down the agenda here, I do want to introduce you to our special guest. And so Michael Tucker is a CRM architect. And as I mentioned earlier, Ryan introduced me to Michael about a year ago when we were struggling at Vindy Digital, just trying to get our CRM working better, more efficient. Some of the things we'll actually be talking about today are very close to home. And Ryan's like, I got a guy. I got a guy you need to talk to. And his name is Michael Tucker, but he goes by Tucker. So everybody here, you have permission to call him Tucker moving forward, I think. But super excited for him to be here. He's like the smartest person I have ever met. And I've talked to a lot of people about CRM over the years. Truly the smartest person I've ever met when it comes to CRM and certainly the architecture of those things. You want to say hi, Michael?
Pleasure to meet everybody. I'm happy to be here today.
So really excited too, Michael. I think this is an important discussion because I think all of us would like to work the leads that we have, but maybe it's just hard to do it because we've got some junk data. We got some challenges on getting to that information. So I think it's going to be a fun discussion today.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So, oh, go ahead, Tucker.
I was just going to add junk data is just one of a myriad of different items that fall onto that list of how you're screwing up your CRM. So we'll get into all that nitty gritty here soon.
Oh, we're going to get into the junk in the trunk soon. So, a couple questions for you guys. First of all, super excited. Paul and I and a handful of vendors are going to Inbound. So, if any of you guys are going, chat us up. Put it in the chat. Let us know you're going to be there. We'd love to visit with you, grab a drink, whatever, hang out, grab some sessions together. But if you're going, we would love to see you there. And then, as usual, or if you haven't been to one of our sessions before, we always like to get things going with a couple of questions. You can see them there in the agenda, but I'll get it started here. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with your current CRM? Right? So, just be thinking about that. 1, very dissatisfied. 5, very satisfied. So, just take a second to think back through every time you log in, or you're trying to get a report, or you're trying to do something. How does it feel? 1 or a 5? So, while you're thinking of that one, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you're thinking about your CRM? And I would say expletives are okay.
I hear dumpster fire a lot. That's a
That we probably should come up with some sort of t-shirt because that's very common. So yeah, I just love to see what you guys are thinking in that department, and then I'll also kind of help us kind of guide how best to serve you today.
Yeah, and I would say before we met Tucker, I would have probably said dumpster fire or some explicitive because it was so challenging. But I'm trying to think of a good word for it today. I don't want to say smooth sailing because I don't know that CRM ever gets to smooth sailing, but certainly calmer waters, right? I mean, that's probably a good way to describe where we are with our CRM today. So
Yeah, like I will say this just too, like it's been a joy to log into a CRM and not make this face.
yeah.
What am I going to do today? So it's nice to know what that feels like.
Yeah,
well, hopefully you're avoiding the. I've looked down at my clock and 3 hours haven't passed to find that one little bit of information I needed.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, rabbit trail, right? Maybe that's another good phrase for CRM today, right? So really good. Yeah, chat those up. We'd love to get your feedback as we go through it. Also, just wanted to let you know we've got an awesome jam session in store for you for September. I can't believe I'm actually saying that word September, but here we are in September. Fall is right around the corner. I think I'm looking forward to it because literally it was 109 degrees, not heat index, but 109 degrees in Dallas on Tuesday. So we're having a cold front today. It's 99. So let us know what the temperature is where you're watching in from too. I'd love to just chat it in. We're going to be 99 today? I'd like to know what everybody else is so I can cry as we're getting blasted with summer's last heat wave here. But as I was mentioning, our jam session in September is really exciting. This is the first time we've actually had a CMO sit in our jam session as our presenter. And so we've often brought these experts in to talk about very important things like Tucker's going to do today around CRM. But we've got Chuck Moxley, who is the CMO of Blue Triangle, coming in next month. And he did this really amazing thing, very somewhat risky thing about 18 months ago. And he pulled all of the gates, all of the forums off of all of his content just to see what happened. And he documented that step by step. And he's going to be here next month to walk us through. And by the way, it's going to be on September 11th, a little bit earlier than normal. As Ryan mentioned, we're going to all be at Inbound. So having to do it a week early next month, but the link to register is right there on the agenda. And you're not going to want to miss this because he literally play by play can walk you through exactly what that experiment was like, what it was like talking the CEO into it, managing that lull between, engagement or pulling those forms away, not seeing the leads that we all get used to, like Linus's blanket when people are opting in to gated content. Right. And then what was it like? What was the outcome? And so I don't want to share those outcomes, but it was pretty good. I won't tell you any more than that. You'll have to come in next month to catch that out, and you can register right there in the agenda. And so let's go ahead and just move right into the general discussion if you're following along. And we're just going to have a conversation about some of these challenges that folks are having in the world of CRM. Tucker's quite an experienced guy, and so he kind of compressed it down to the big three, and we're going to talk about those, and then we'll move into the presentation part towards the end, and we'll talk about how do we fix those. But before we get into the actual common mistakes, the first question I just wanted to pose to the group is, why is this an important topic? Like, why is having a good, clean CRM, marketing automation house, working our existing leads, why is that so important?
Well, I'm going to start this off, and I want you guys to kind of pile in on this one too. But something you guys have heard Paul and I and team talk about forever is the buyer journey continues to change, and the complexities that continue to bubble up cause marketers like us to keep chasing up new trees and squirrels and shiny objects and trinkets and going all over the place to try to match up our buyers who want to buy from you and you want to sell to them, but for a lot of reasons they don't connect. Paul and I always call about kind of the bowl of spaghetti as far as the journey goes. So guys and gals here, how does the CRM help with that?
Yeah, Ryan, it reminds me also of a post that you did earlier this week that was just about, the cost of generating a new lead versus the cost of working an existing lead. I talked about this at the top of the session today, but man, we are all sitting on a gold mine if we could just access the data the right way. And sending a spray and pray email to all 4,000 or 10,000 of your contacts is not the right way to accomplish it. Sherry did a great job last month talking about really aligning those marketing messages to the buyer journey. But if you don't have a good CRM, you're not going to know where they are in the buyer journey, right?
Yep, too true. My favorite thing to say when I'm on a call with a client is, why are you going to go spend $150 on a cost per click for a paid ad when you've already spent X amount of dollars on a multi-thousand contact database that you have very probably inefficiently utilized? It's way easier to sell to someone who you have an established relationship with, or at least have really solid data as to who they are and how they interacted with you in the past. You don't have that, you keep spending on advertising all day long till the cows come home.
Yeah, absolutely. What we all have heard the saying that, or the stat rather, that only 5% of our customers are ever in market, which means 95% of our customers are not in market. And so, even if we're trying to generate new leads all the time, and I'm not here to discount lead generation, that's a healthy part of our process, but we've got to nurture those relationships in a way that keeps us top of mind. And when we have a bad CRM system, we end up in these spray and pray actions, if you will, that aren't going to help us stay top of mind or aren't going to deliver the kind of value that's going to nurture relationships the right way. And so the more we can have better information about our data, better information about our customers, and actually treat them like humans, not contact records, the better success we're going to have, right?
Absolutely.
This whole thing started a long, long time ago as a system that would manage relationships, and they call it a customer relationship management tool. We forgot about that. A lot of marketers forgot about it. And I think now we call it the chaotic rationale for marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, how do I defend what I'm doing? Well, what's going on over here? But Paul, you said it really well. Again, it's about people. And it's a relationship management tool. It's not the end all be all. It's a tool as part of an entire ecosystem that, if you remember that, it's really important. Now, like, the part that gets interesting is sales and marketing have been closer and closer and closer to becoming one again. Again, about 10 years ago plus, it was like that way. And then everybody thought, oh, let's break them apart. You can't have a director of sales and marketing. You can't do all this. Now it's coming back together because it's about the relationship, right? So now you have RevOps and all these other things that are popping up that are really talking about that. Well, guess what? The tech stacks followed suit. So now when we hear, a lot of us, when we hear CRM, we immediately think sales and marketing. It never used to be that way. So if you're feeling really like overwhelmed and, to your point earlier, Tucker, if your CRM is a dumpster fire, you are not alone, because you're trying to do sales and marketing and when again, it was originally this concept of CRM. So you guys are, buckle up today because we're going to help you understand sort of some of those problems, but then like, how do you unravel that and make it work in a way that actually drives valuable pipeline?
Yeah.
Right. And to add a point there, Ryan, something I like to very commonly say that sometimes ruffles some feathers depending on how tightly you hold to your tech stacks is CRM's dead. It's gone. To your point, like back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, what Salesforce was founded in 1999, you had your silo of sales technology, you had your silos of marketing technology, you have your silos of customer success, website, really anything that fell under that umbrella of RevOps. Nowadays, I say CRM is dead and it's all about CXMs, customer experience management, because the journey doesn't start with just marketing and then magically ends in sales. It's the entire process all the way through. And that is a never ending feedback loop of information, as well as data points that you can constantly iterate on to improve various strategies throughout that entire pipeline. So if you don't really have that big picture mentality of everybody owns this one individual contact record, you're missing the boat.
Yeah, you just made me think about, Google just recently punted on the whole third-party cookie thing. They were like, it's coming,
Yeah.
it's coming, we're going to get rid of it, it's coming, it's coming. And then, you know what? We can't figure it out. So it's not
Right.
coming. But the reality is it put all of us on alert to think about first-party data and making sure that we have good first-party data. And the best place to store first-party data is in your CRM, CXM, whatever we want to call it. So all good stuff. So why don't we go ahead and jump in to the mistakes here, Ryan? You want to tee that up for us?
Yeah, this is the hardest one, I think, for a lot of people, but is poor data management. And this is a broad topic, right? But if you kind of think of it as, the old, garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, but this is a deep and wide cave of things, right? It's maybe you're migrating some data, maybe you're getting some things set up from a data perspective. Most people do okay there. Tucker, you may disagree, but it's the ongoing is where people
Yes.
get slaughtered, right? It's the governance, it's the management, it's the expectations. And I'm going to quote you on this, Tucker, but as an employer, we give, let's just say, salespeople a paycheck. What we would expect from them is that they do data entry correctly and they do their job from a data. They owe us good data. We owe you a paycheck. Like, think about that for a second. That's a big deal.
Yep, that is that's the soup to nuts of it all, and you usually get some eye rolls when he makes up a statement to a team of sales reps. But at the end of the day, whether they want to admit it or not, the data that they're putting in is the data that best services them down the pipeline. I think if you step back from CRM as a whole, right, and you're looking at data management, at its core to an executive, the value out of a CRM is visibility. What is my business doing? How long does it take me to close a deal? Where are my most valuable lead sources? How well are we handling our customers from an onboarding standpoint or a ticket resolution standpoint? And that makes sense to the C-suites and the people that need this information to assess what the wind is doing from a directional standpoint. But if you take that down a step into that umbrella, into the individual teams that fall under RevOps, right, the data is the enablement component. You can do more with data that you trust, that is reliable, that then it allows you to expand your efforts in a much more impactful and at the end of the day, more bottom line affecting fashion.
So I'm just going to sprinkle one
go
in
ahead,
there.
Ryan.
So I've sat in agency role, I've sat in brand side, I've sat in a lot of different seats, and being able to go into your system and trust the data is the biggest sore spot across my career of all the things and stuff that we work with clients all the time. And how many of you don't have to answer if you don't want, but in your head, like you see the data and you go, I'm not sure. And then what do? You go into your backends, you go to your Excel spreadsheets, you go to your other systems, you go to your tech stacks, you talk to your RevOps manager, you talk to the sales manager, you talk to marketing manager, then you go, yeah, it's pretty close. Okay. So that is a box of work that we can help eliminate just by having better data.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I loved about Tucker when you started working with us on our CRM implementation is, I really came into it and was very frustrated with our implementation, but I was viewing it from a marketing perspective. You know, I'm very kind of marketing led these days, and I was in there talking about, well, what about lead score and what about this and what about that, and the thing that I really appreciated, Tucker, that you did with us as it relates to data management. And he's like, whoa, 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 hey, you know, this really isn't CRM, it's CXM. He kind of introduced that concept to us and started with, you know, what are the true things that we need to monitor
Right.
and measure, and how are we going to get those into the system? And the
Right.
big aha moment for me was when we actually, you know, we're a HubSpot shop, when we actually started looking at life cycle stages and defining what
Hmm.
those meant and how they're going to get triggered from one stage to the next, and agreeing on what makes sense for the business, instead of just, you know, hey, what do we think it should be? It's like literally,
Right.
let's build this thing out so that we can see what happens when somebody, you know, attends a jam session, all the way
Right.
to a happy customer that's saying good things about us in social media. What does that journey look like? What really matters for us to capture about that, the life of that individual, and then how are we going to see the things and the signals that they're going to be able to throw off in order for us to engage them at the right times. And so if you don't think about that stuff at the beginning, you're going to be putting a lot of duct tape and baling wire on the back end to try to get to it. And that, I think, Ryan, goes right back to what you were saying about how frustrating it can be to look at the data and go, I don't know. Where is this person in the journey? I have no
Right.
clue where they are. So I don't even know what kind of email to send them, or what to have the sales rep do when they do outreach to them.
Well, and what's
Yeah.
even worse is if you guys, those of you who are hanging your hats with decent sized companies, if you're in charge of marketing and you bring a report from your version of the truth in your CRM to the boardroom meeting or executive level meeting, and then your sales leader is bringing an entirely different set of data, but under the same constructs, that's when it's a really big problem. Everybody has
Right.
a leg on their face, the board or your executive team's kind of like, what's going on here? Right. And I've seen that many, many times. So it could be really frustrating.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, what about this? Like, just riding along with shotgun with what you just said, Ryan, it's like not only do they bring their set of data, but for some reason, the sales team believes that they generated all the leads and all the pipeline came from them. And your marketing data says, no, wait a minute, all the pipeline came from marketing sourced, right?
Right.
And that's data
Yeah.
management too.
And I think it was safe to say, Paul, when we first got in touch with one another, that you wanted to strangle me in a good way because I wouldn't let you get to that point of lead scoring, right? It's like, I want my deal stages to look like this. I want my properties to look like this. And I consistently pumped the brakes on you and said, okay, what does that actually mean, right? You tell me you've got 5 stages in your deal pipeline. What does that stage mean? What are the activities taking place? What's the information exchanging hands? What are the actions and follow-ups, things to that effect? And that backtracks all the way to that initial form fill of like, what information are we asking people to fill out? Is it actually critical for us to know? Marketing wants a 20 property long form, so they have every bit of segmentation purposes. Sales couldn't care that point because at the end of the day, they're either going to fill it in or write over it themselves. So all those little things that bubble up to the things that people care most about, right, is good close rates, positive experiences for the customer. If you can't very systematically track that back to like, we asked this question for a reason, this is part of our process to capture this information, it then triggers X, Y, and Z downstream. Like if you don't have that kind of mentality, and I think Paul's got a good slide for that later on to kind of show what that looks like, then you're just kind of hoping on a wing and a prayer that something's going to sort out the way it needs to. But to your points, that's where marketing has their understanding of what lead generation looks like, where sales gets their interpretation. And it just goes round and round, and you get into those stereotypical debates that have existed for years.
Yeah, you told me no so many times in implementation, and at first it did piss me off, honestly. But as we went into it, and I realized what you're trying to do is build a functional MVP
Right.
implementation that, you know, collects the data, understands where that data is coming from, how it's going to migrate. And when I say data, it's really people, right? How they're going to move through the journey, and really force us to validate, why do we need to know that? Why do we need to have that? So that we can get to the foundation. I mean, that's one of the things we're really kind of touching on today is you got to build a solid foundation. Lead scoring is not bad. We just implemented lead scoring multiple months after we got our MVP implementation. Don't tell Tucker that, but we did actually just deploy lead
I didn't get
scoring.
that phone call.
Yeah, but the point is that should not have been really in our foundations, because the foundation and fixing, setting yourself up for success so you don't have problems down the road that you try to solve with duct tape and baling wire is getting that MVP implementation in first, making sure everybody's trained on it the right way, making sure the data is flowing the right way. Then you can start adding the more advanced things. I think where people really get into trouble is they've got shiny trinket syndrome. I've got the same problem. I mean, HubSpot does a million things. I want it to do all that day one. Well, the reality is, snowballs, they start small and they get bigger as they go down the hill. And that's the way we need to think about our CRM implementations as well. Anything else we want to cover on that before we move into mistake number 2?
I just want to put a little bit of sprinkles on the ice cream here, and just for everybody to distill down that you should, as usual, with a lot of things, start with the end in mind. What are you trying to have visibility around? Specific metrics, specific buckets of information that will help your business make informed decisions is the most important thing. Part of those decisions is, what can I be doing better to walk alongside my prospects and customers on their journey? If you deviate outside of that, you're going to create a mess of what most people end up creating for themselves and then end up hating their systems, and they don't work. And if you're a Salesforce customer or otherwise, you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for a system that doesn't do you any good.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, that's a great segue. Go ahead, Tucker.
The last thing I'd add here on this point is more of the symptoms and the cures, right? If you're going back after this conversation and jumping into your CRM, if you're seeing things like lead inflation or pipeline inflation, or your marketing team is complaining that they can't really address a specific audience with a specific message because they just can't figure out who those people are, or your close rates are really weak, those are the big red flags that data management is at core of that issue. So when you start thinking about how to solve that, it's not only the step back to define what data should look like, how it should be interacted with, how it should be grown and enriched. You also have to look at it from that process and leadership standpoint, right? I think, Paul, you made the comment earlier on, like, data management is a thankless and tedious job, but it has to happen, right? The core, like, you can build the best system in the world, but if you don't keep it maintained and progressively evolving, right? Paul emphasized the MVP. You can't build perfection out of the gate. It's impossible to do, and you'll get yourself in trouble. But there's got to be someone who has the responsibility to go back in and make sure that these things are happening, that it's a consistent story time and again, so you build that trust. And to do that effectively, right, you need a RevOps oriented individual to be that hammer, right? They've got to be the bull in the china shop. They've got to be the litmus test. They got to be the person that says no when someone has some random request to add something to the solution. And that eventually pulls back towards the overarching leadership on these specific teams. If they're not putting the emphasis on the individuals in the system, working in the system, then you could be great for a couple of months, but that same old problem is going to catch right back up to you, and then you're going to be in the same mess all over again.
Yeah. So management training, getting everybody on the same page, that's really so important. Down in the resource section, we have a blog that actually Tucker helped us write earlier this year. It's on data attribution leaks. And one of the top data attribution leaks is just having the sales reps not doing the hygiene type work that they need to be doing. If they learn, hey, this company's in this industry, or this company, is doing this thing, or I just sent them a quote, all those kinds of things have to get documented, and there needs to be rigor and discipline around it if we're going to be able to run reliable reports down the road. If we really want to know what is our pipeline velocity, how long does it take to close a deal? Those things require, CRM isn't going to do it by themselves. It's going to take management to accomplish that too, which I think is a great segue into the next problem, which is lack of clear strategy. And, I have to admit, we do a lot of strategy work here at Vindy Digital and help our clients build demand gen strategies and go-to-market strategies. But when Tucker got involved with our CRM, he kind of laughed at us because we didn't really have a strategy when it came to what are we doing with our data. And so, really, when Tucker gave us these mistakes, I would have almost made this mistake number one, because if you don't have an end game and goal in mind, like you don't know what the end product looks like and really what you're trying to accomplish with your CRM, you're never, ever going to get there. Right, Tucker?
Absolutely. You could run the best possible demand gen campaign, the best outbound prospecting play. You get into ABM, get into database marketing, what have you, but all of those things still operate on the same subset of data throughout all of it. So I'll very commonly say that your CRM architecture is a reflection of the cohesion and effectiveness of your marketing, sales, and CS teams. It includes web and other teams that are now getting thrown into the mix, right? If your CRM isn't in a state to handle where these teams want to go with their strategies, because the board's always going to want more every single year, so it's always a progressive move the ball down the field, you've got to have this system that everything talks together well. Everybody has a comprehensive story of the interactions that the contacts are doing, and you're getting the data and takeaway outputs from your initiatives stored in such a fashion so you can confidently say, this worked and here's why, this didn't work for whatever reason. If you don't have all of that in such a fashion to where we're going to do this thing and this is how we're going to be able to look back on it, the CRM, then you've got then it's broken at its fundamental core. So in that instance, right, if you're trying to wring a towel and get every last drop out of every dollar spent, as we all feel, budgets are tightening left and right over the last handful of years. This data is that enablement piece there, and it all ties back to the strategy upon which these teams are thinking through things, how that then becomes more of a business operating mindset of, it's not just me with my marketing blinders on, it's this is going to happen here, and it's going to affect this team in this fashion and this team in this fashion, and that story has to be very, very front and center for anyone who wants to access it.
Yeah, man, one of the things you just said there that I thought was a golden nugget is, the strategy can't be department centric, right? The strategy has to be enterprise centric. And I think so often in our own experience and what I've seen in other companies too, is there's somebody leading the charge. It's either marketing leading the charge or sales leading the charge. And you end up with something that's not going to create the enterprise value that you really need this thing to do. And so you end up, with one department feeling very satisfied, but really it's not accomplishing what the company needs it to do for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really have to take CRM out of the corner from a mindset standpoint, and instead of just this thing that I have to go log information into, or it's just part of my workflow, and you really have to put it on a mutually agreed upon pedestal. It's not just a tool. It's not just some SQL database. It's the central nervous system of all these teams in terms of how they're operating and how all of that stuff works together really, really well.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Ryan, anything you got to add?
You guys just crushed that one. One of the recommendation is just to consider to have almost like a advocate in each corner of the building, someone who can be relatively unbiased and respectful and mediate, because it gets hot in that room.
Yes.
It gets, and especially the larger the organizations, the hotter it gets. There are hot sports opinions. There are all kinds of things that have to be mitigated through to get to a civil understanding of how does a system serve each of the teams. So just be thinking like, man, we really need a new CRM in the next couple of years, just to start looking around to see who can be sort of the rep for each of the departments.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Tucker, what do you do when you're working with a company and you can tell that their strategy is myopic or too department centric? How do you elevate the conversation?
Yeah, so part of my process is always going in and performing just can I figure this out on my own sort of bit, right? You can backtrack that to let's say whoever your CRM person is, let's say they're really good. If they get hit by a bus, how are you going to onboard a new employee into this system? Is it going to be something that takes them a week to figure out? Well, it's going to drastically elongate your onboarding times. So that's from that standpoint of making sure that that cohesive strategy allows for scale and efficiency. That's a big thing to look at. Another telltale sign I see a lot is you build solutions to fix your solutions, right? very evident when there's lack of strategy, right? I'm going to go in, I'm going to build this thing out. Oh, I got this one request from this other team, and there was no one there to play the me role and say, no, we're not going to do that. Here's why. You have to really sell me on something for it to be built out in the system, because it's going to have far-reaching consequences, good or bad, that if you haven't really thought through, then it shouldn't be really a discussion point. And that's where you get a lot of these bubblegum and duct tape sort of solutions that people are trying their best to make and mold something, but it's all because there's a lack of coherent strategy there to begin with. So that translates really quickly into a lot of companies going like, our CRM's trash, let's go re-platform. It's a super expensive either consulting fee or a new license fee, right? There's a lot of inefficiencies in process, right? Like, how long does it take your salesperson to get a quote approved or built in the first place and sent out? Things that should be very simple that effectively that impact sales cycle length, right? You can always track back to, well, how is someone working in this? Why are they doing those things? Are they doing something before they should be doing something else? That whole order of operations. Those are really big symptoms to keep an eye out for, and then raise the flag accordingly. Those are big pain points for the organization.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you're thinking about strategy, and I know most of us already have some CRM deployed, a big takeaway here is, you need somebody in the organization like a Tucker. It doesn't have to be Tucker. It can be just somebody that's responsible for understanding this request and how does this, when you were talking, I got the vision in my mind of like dominoes, and this domino is going to fall. What other dominoes are going to be implicated? If you're a kid in a candy jar, you're not thinking about that. You're not thinking about, I'm going to give myself diabetes if I eat all the cookies that are in this cookie jar. I need a parent to say, you can have one cookie after dinner, and when you put your dishes in the dishwasher, right? Now you can have a cookie. So if you let the kids do it, they're just going to eat all the cookies until they get sick. And so what's really important is that, maybe a step one is just have that person that's sitting there and saying, hey, is this request really trying to fix something that's actually broken foundationally? Is this request going to help us downstream accomplish the things we're trying to accomplish? Or is this request really just a shiny trinket that's not going to create a lot of value and just create more headaches and time and waste? All of that, I think, going back to the strategy term, just goes back to what is our true north? What are we trying to do with our customers, and how is data and our CRM going to help us get there? That's got to be the true north that keeps us from doing stupid things, right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think we can definitely call back to our engagement in the sense of, I didn't let you talk about the system itself for the first couple of weeks. It was about defining the business process. The CRM itself is just a tool. It doesn't fix your business processes. If anything, it's going to put a magnifying glass on them and show you how much lack of strategy or how poorly defined something is. So I won't even touch the actual system itself until you can very confidently define, like, what's a lead, what's your ICP, what's your growth strategy today, what's your growth strategy tomorrow. All those considerations have to go into what is being thought through when you actually construct such a system. So I think when a big problem with a lot of systems-oriented people, a lot of people who occupy RevOps sort of roles, is they lack that why factor and that broader business process mindset, right? Something I took for myself is I've been a marketing director, led sales teams, I've done sales enablement, I've done customer success teams. So I've sat in the hot seats of all these individuals. And if you have some systems person who's just going to be that, hey, I need something, go build it for me. They're not going to ask questions, anything like that. You're setting yourself up for a lot of potential failure. So that individual you put in charge of the strategy has to be able to talk the languages of all these respective teams to define that business process, to define that business, to define the strategy that your CRM is eventually built on.
Awesome. Well, I think we beat that one to death. You guys want to move on to mistake number three?
I gotta bring the sprinkles back a little bit.
Okay, bring the sprinkles back and then tee us up.
Key things: do really well with what you have first, right? So if you feel like your system's broken and you feel all these things, go validate that with someone who may have a different perspective. Don't go out and buy a bunch of new stuff. I've seen people spend $1 gazillion going to try to add new things, to your point earlier, Paul. Do what you have really well first. tool utilization is typically what, 30 to 40% maybe of a good company. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Go get to 60, 80% of tool utilization before you freak out. The
Right.
last analogy I'll put on this is if you guys ever use your, small engines at home, which now I know a lot of things are moving to electric and things, but that little bulb where you push to get the gas primed, right? If you hit that, what's it, two or three, four or five times and it doesn't start right away and you're getting frustrated, what do? You keep
Kick it.
hitting it. You
I,
keep hitting.
I always kick it. I thought that's
Well,
what you
kicking
did.
is good, but you keep hitting the bulb. And all that does is flood the engine.
Yes, it does.
A lot of people are flooding their CRM engines by just dumping more gas and more crap on top of it and hoping that it really works out.
Right.
Just don't do it. Sprinkles over.
Awesome. Why don't you
Perfect
tee up
segue.
the last mistake, Ryan?
Yeah. So the last mistake. This is a great one and actually just ties into what I was saying. Overcomplicated workflows, overcomplicated CRMs, overcomplicated everything. Again, we've seen it time and time again, where people are just pouring gas basically on a fire that's not even lit, hoping that something happens. It's very easy to do. It's very expensive and it causes problems down the road. So Tucker team, how do we get there? Why do we overcomplicate things and how do we get ourselves out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I were to put it on ends of the spectrum, I would say that far left of that spectrum is your poor data management component. And I think the counterpart to it on the far right is overcomplication. And I made the point in our last topic was just because someone wants something or they desire something to be built doesn't justify that it should exist in the first place. Lead scoring. Complexity doesn't equal effectiveness, right? And you always have to consider that the more you build, the more you have to manage. And this is a tandem relationship topic in the sense that not only does it apply to say like actual physical automation workflows inside a CRM, which you can complicate till the cows come home, but it also translates directly back to business process, right? If you can't very easily, back of a napkin, articulate, this is how we operate, someone's going to have a question, someone's going to take a misstep. And that's where you just get into bubblegum and duct tape and your solutions, then needing to make solutions to fix your previous solutions.
Yeah, Tucker, you said this to me so many times during the implementation and our implementation, and it's something that I say all the time. So it was interesting to have the table turned on me and used against me, but it's very true. And the statement is just because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
Yeah.
And take a product like HubSpot. It's an amazing CRM. It does amazing things. I mean, it even has AI baked in now, right? So there's so many cool things you can do, but just because you can do all these cool things doesn't necessarily mean you should. And we'll get into some of this when we start talking about how do we fix these things. But I appreciated that because it really kind of helped me take a step back and go, yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming from. We shouldn't do everything until we know at least the foundation's working and humming along.
Right. And that's where my MVP mentality goes for. Like, I will forcibly put in guardrails that say, like, we're going to build this. We can't build perfection. Perfection is impossible to achieve directly out of the gate. So, especially with larger, more complicated organizations, all right, we're going to agree on this project. We're going to overhaul your CRM. Here's the basics of what we've defined as mission critical necessary. And then I will forcibly say, do not talk to me about this for 3 to 6 months until you've proven that you've gone in there, you've followed the process and the steps that we've set up, you've beaten things up, and you've started to actually poke legitimate holes in something. So CRM is always a state of evolution. It has to mirror the evolution of the business. So if you're not giving things time to gel, you're very quickly going to overcomplicate things with quick fix solutions and things like that. So it's one where start with what is necessary and then build from there with something that's very justifiable. You got to have those battle scars to say, this is clearly not working or it's not scaling effectively. And that's where you get into good growth, good complexity where that is justifiable.
Yeah, I'll give you an example in our case. Like one of my personal goals with redoing our CRM was to be more data driven. Like I wanted us as a company and the CEO of the company for us to be more data driven. And so Tucker was asking when in the strategy phase, what are you trying to accomplish? That was one of the things that I mentioned to him is we want to be more data driven. We want to rely on our data. And so I didn't want to move beyond our MVP implementation until I could see reports that the team had put together that clearly showed what we call the contact waterfall, but how people are moving through our system. And I wanted, as the CEO, I wanted to be able to go into HubSpot, look at a dashboard, and clearly see the contact waterfall and trust that the data, the people that were moving into our different life cycle stages was accurate, valid, that the right things were happening, the right actions were taking place as people were moving from one stage to the next. And if it weren't for you, Tucker, really kind of getting me in that MVP mindset, I would have thrown so much other things into it that I may have completely missed the mark on, what are you trying to accomplish? Well, it goes back to, I want to be more data driven. I want our company to be more data driven. So now that we have high levels of confidence in that piece, like the CEO of the company can actually go look at a dashboard and feel confident that he's seeing the information. Now we can start adding some shiny trinkets to it that are going to be like putting a turbocharger on top of what we've already built.
Yeah, that's a big important call out there. And especially if you employ RevOps people, CRM admins, things like that. Those people, if they are, put them in that nice, neat box of like they just do CRM stuff. Those people in their DNA want to build really cool stuff. And so it's the catch-22 of these individuals to where they have the ability to do a lot of these things when they get those requests. But again, if they don't step back and assess that larger business environment from a revenue standpoint, that's where you wind up with an overcomplicated mess. Like I can automate systems all day long, but that doesn't mean I should, in the sense that if I build some massive complicated workflow in place to move somebody through a aggressive lead round robining sort of example, if I don't keep that in mind, if I don't keep track of it, then you got to start worrying about overlap with other processes, overlapping with other workflows. And where if someone perfectly fills out the thing, yeah, it does what it's supposed to, but someone takes that one misstep, everything you've built up downstream, manual or automated, it just falls off. It gets it's in a state of lack of usability, and you're playing more manual cleanup, more manual catch up, and you're right back to where you started.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's do this. I just looked at the clock. We got like 13 minutes left, and that was a good conversation. But let's talk about how do we fix these things. And so I'm going to share my screen. And I know we've kind of talked a lot about some of this stuff already. But let's kind of visually talk about it. And we wanted to throw this slide up here first, just to kind of put some things in perspective. And Ryan, I'm going to tee it over to you.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't seen this slide before, it's really interesting. This is a study done by Hockey Stack, which is an attribution tool looking at a lot of different data sets. But what we know is this is ultimately what it takes to get a sale. Okay, so if you look here on the left here, kind of impressions and things like that, and you look at the bottom, it's about 2,600 impressions that an individual needs to see from the brand to have this emotional connection, right? Then there's 222 roughly signals that need to be basically thrown off by a target, basically engagement, things like that, that have to happen in order for a prospect to come into your world and become a customer. So if you're thinking, oh my goodness, that's ridiculous, it is, right? It's absolutely overwhelming if you really think about it. But that's the B2B world that we live in.
Yep.
Some big considerations in here is if you look at the top, right? So that's really this kind of high nurture effectiveness, low effectiveness. This is where sales loves to go live. They want to be in there so bad, but that's really not where they should be, right? This is a lot of where the marketing in, and then sometimes marketing wants to play down lower, but ultimately this is where the sales is most effective. So just keeping some of that in mind, and this goes back to our spaghetti analogy of the buyer journey and all the things that have to happen and why CRMs are so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of this cocktail you're going to see Tucker go into is, again, it's not just sales, it's not just marketing, now it's customer service, now it's all these other things that come together in a really new and interesting way that we're excited to share with you guys.
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to add to this slide, just about this slide, when you don't have good CRM, data management, you haven't done all the things we just got through talking about and Tucker's about to talk about how to resolve, then what ends up happening is marketing just hands every lead over to sales because they don't know
Yep.
how to tell where they are in the journey. And then you end up with a sales team that thinks that marketing only produces crappy leads. And the reality is, in today's world, with the buyer behavior that we're dealing with, that all of that stuff in the first part has got to be handled by marketing and marketing actions. And your CRM, look at all those signals that are happening. Your CRM is the place that you're going to see all those signals. And so if you're not seeing them, you're just going to be spray and praying your leads and hoping that somebody turns into a sale. And you end up with unhappy customers, unhappy leads, and unhappy sales reps. And it's so easy to fix if you just lay a good foundation.
Last thing, really tangible data, guys. So through our tech stack, the last 2 or 3 leads that have filled out forms, believe it or not, people filling out forms, we go back into our CRM and our stack, and we can see in some cases 2 years worth of data of their engagement, their interactions. What are they consuming? We let them do their thing. Go do you, and we're happy to continue to serve you. But when they converted, we go back and it's like, holy mackerel, 2 years worth of data. So you can see where that 2,600 number and the 222 come from.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Tucker. So how do we fix this thing?
Right. So I think the important point coming off of that slide is if you can't see that sort of information to that level of granularity, something's wrong somewhere along the process. You should very clearly be able to articulate, we took 5 emails, 10 cold outreaches, X amount of social engagement, number of content downloads. All of those things you should be able to drill down with a riff and a reasonable state of maturity to really define how your buyer's journey progresses, right? Otherwise, you really don't know, like, what about this paid media ad did the job, right? And you track the attribution models and things like that. But that's the goal you're striving to get to. And you're not going to figure that out overnight. You're not going to have that perfect story immediately. But the way you get there to that is back to the points I've made here. Like, CRM is dead. When you think about all the teams that operate on this shared common database of activity and engagement data, you have to understand the handshakes between each teams. And that's where I talk a lot about the RevOps triangle here with CXM sitting in the middle. Sales wants leads from marketing, but marketing needs really good contact data to better segment, to better target, to better communicate. Sales owes CS for a positive handoff process, the entire engagement story, right? Because sales wants on the flip side of that, the ability to renew, the ability to upsell, to land and expand. Marketing and CS, if you look at this from a linear standpoint, you'd think those are the two ends on the opposite ends. But in reality, marketing needs CS information to understand who they can go out to from a customer advocacy standpoint, get those G2 reviews, get those customer testimonials, referred in business. But as part of that, marketing typically managing a lot of the support of CS in terms of helping them do what they're supposed to do. Marketing's reliant on producing some of that content, whether it's product marketing materials, knowledge bases, help guides, things like that, where there's a direct connection if you just take that linear, the old entire linear model, and you just fold it down into a triangle. So you got to start with this mindset. And if you understand looking into your own organizations that they're not taught, these teams aren't talking in such an efficient fashion, and the core system that they're all utilizing isn't communicating that end-to-end story, that goes straight back into we've really got to define our business processes. What's a lead? What's a contact? What justifies an opportunity? All these things get into the points then of all the KPIs and metrics that the executives want, right? What are our close rates? Is our pipeline sandbagging here? Are we overinflating our lead volumes, right? Without those clear definitions and that clear progression all the way through these different teams, that's how you have to start with that mentality and that refresh if you are experiencing a lot of these pains and problems along the way. Then you can get in.
Moment for me, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in here because I just want people to understand this. Like when Tucker and I first started talking about optimizing our CRM instance, in 5 minutes, he quickly assessed where my brain was at, and my brain was in that bottom left corner. I was looking at this from a marketing point of view, and he stopped me and he's like, dude, hold on. I understand you want to do all these marketing things, and I understand that HubSpot's going to do all those things for you. And he literally drew this triangle for me. And he's like, marketing is just one part of the process. And unless you fix the actual foundation of contact records and what are you trying to accomplish and how is that user going to move through your entire enterprise, you're never going to be successful. And so that was like the big aha moment for me. It's like, holy cow, okay, I've really got to step back and think about this human being that is in our database that is going to go through a process, and how do we make sure that that's an amazing experience for them every step of the way. And so if you're struggling with your CRM, it may be that you're leaning in one of these areas and not thinking about it holistically at all.
Yep. You got to move all of these balls down the field in the same pace. Otherwise, you get out of balance and you're way heavy in one area where the bottom's going to come out, or there's expectations on the end of the play for something to happen. But because you didn't have something on the front side, you weren't loaded appropriately there. These are where these holes and these problems persist, and bubblegum and duct tape starts to come out real quick.
Yeah. Hey, Tucker, I'm going to move us just because we got like 5 minutes left. So this was a really great slide. I want to make sure you get a chance to talk through it.
Yeah, so we've talked about all the problems here, so I'm not going to go back into those, but very clearly, like these are the build process of a system comes down to these big 3 points, right? It's the data definition, it's the business process, it's the understanding of what information you need to collect. The process component is, first of all, understanding if you removed automation from the equation, right? How do people need to move things through from marketing to sales to CS and so on? And then you can take that into the efficiency game of building an automation and processes in the system itself to do that for you in a more optimized manner. At the end of it all, you're always playing to avoid that overcomplication or that unjustified overcomplication, the development and deployment aspect, right? It's that hard litmus test of just because you ask for it doesn't mean you should get it. So mapping this out in such a fashion that really justifies what you're getting into and being able to track that all the way back up through this entire process, that gets you to the goalpost that you really want to be at for something to then grow off of and mature at a good scalable rate.
Yeah. One thing about that too is, take a platform like HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever. I mean, they're relatively easy to deploy, right? I mean, you can turn them on, throw the cookies on the site, get the things going, move your data over, send an email, and you're in business, quote unquote. In fact, we're a HubSpot partner, and the reality is they'll check the box and say you are implemented as a customer if you have your CRM data in there and you're able to do a hub-centric function. So if you bought their marketing hub and you send an email, then to somebody in your list, then you're done, right? That's in their mind, you are implemented. And I understand why they do that, but at the same time, that kind of sets businesses up for struggles down the road because it doesn't force them to think about all the things that you've been talking about today, Tucker. And so, even if you've already got a pretty sophisticated system, or you're just starting out with CRM, it's important that you kind of think through these things if you're going to have some success.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say here to sprinkle on top is the mentality of, oh, let's get going, we'll go back and fix it later. Never happens.
Yeah.
No one goes back and cleans it up. Business keeps moving forward. So that thing that's not mission critical right this second is not going to get the time and attention down the road.
Yeah.
It's like when you buy a house and you say, oh, we're going to redo that kitchen. We're going to redo it next year. And then 20 years later, well, maybe next year we'll do that.
Yeah, exactly. So as we're wrapping up here, we got like 2 minutes left. I'm not expecting you guys to understand or see this slide at all, but I wanted you to appreciate, well, how does this actually work? And so what I'm showing you is literally a screenshot of Vendy Digital's ARC map. And so when we first started working with Tucker, he started asking me all those business enterprise questions when I was thinking about marketing, and I was talking about lead scoring and all this stuff I wanted to accomplish. And he started asking me really hard questions, and he told me about the idea of MVP, and let's just map out an MVP experience for your data and customers, and let's get that right. Let's ask all the hard questions along the way, and let's map it out. I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Well, the crazy thing is what you're looking at right here, this is our MVP implementation. Every one of those boxes represents decisions that Tucker, doggone it, you made us think about in order to understand what does a person's experience look like as they move through our system. And so I cannot tell you how valuable this has been for us. It was like starting over from a CRM perspective, but we had the right point of view now because we were thinking about it as a human being. Ryan, you said this at the beginning of the jam session. We took the R out of customer relationship management, right? It's put the R back in. What are we going to do with this human being, and how can we make sure that their journey with us is visible and that we can give them an amazing experience at every step of the way? And so if you're looking for like, where do I go from here? A good step, because it worked great for us, was just architect it. Like, let's just think about all the different ways that people enter your system. What status level or what life cycle stage are they going to be at? How do they migrate through until they're a deal? And then what does that look like? And then what happens after they become a customer? You'll be amazed at what you learn about your data by doing that. And anything you want to add there, Tucker, as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah, last point on this would be look yourself in the mirror and say, could you do this with your current system? Could you articulate it in such a fashion that you have a net new employee who sits down and say, how does this business work? I design these documents where you can literally drop this on someone's desk and be like, here it is. Nice, pretty picture. You should be able to get up and going now in half the time you maybe were expecting to. So if you can't put things in simple terms, and while this does look a little complicated, it's really not that complicated. It's just the hard questions along the way. But if you can't put something in simple terms or articulate something in a very straightforward fashion, you got problems.
Yeah. So, Tucker, thank you for your time today. This has been incredibly invaluable. I know if you guys, this was a complex topic that we covered. If you have more questions or think of questions even after today or when we get the replay out to you, don't hesitate to reach out to us or jump on the Demand Gen Jammers community and carry the conversation there. We'll be happy to jump in there, answer them for you. Tucker's a part of our community, so he can jump in and answer those for you too. Hopefully this was a super valuable session for you. Maybe one you want to listen to a couple of times to really get the essence of everything that we covered. But we look forward to seeing you guys early next month, September 11th, where we have Chuck Moxley coming in. He's going to talk about the experience of ungating all their content at Blue Triangle. It's a really cool story. Hopefully you can make that. If you're going to be at Inbound later on in September, let us know because we'd love to see you while we're there. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next month. Take care, everybody.